Thank you, Mayor. I just also want to just applaud you for that global vision and where you're taking the city and the region. I think it really is a model for other mayors in other cities. I also want to thank our partner, JP, Todd, Mayor Daley, the rest of the team. I think we basically have defined the next wave of growth in the United States, and I think are helping to inspire and catalyze not just dialogue, but action around the country. So for the past several years, we've been boringly consistent at Brookings. We all know in this room that we are still emerging from the Great Recession. We still need to grow 10.1 million jobs in this country to make up the jobs we lost during the recession and keep pace with population growth. But even more importantly, we need to grow better jobs, because what we saw was a quantum leap in people living in poverty and near poverty, from 81 million in 2000 to 107 million people in 2011. And so we have to think very clearly about restructuring our economy from one pre-recession that was really characterized by consumption and debt to one that pursues a very different growth model that works for working families. So I'll make 3 points today. The first is to lay out that growth model. And it really is a vision of an economy that is driven by exports and more global engagement, really, as the mayor said, that is powered by low and lower carbon, as is happening in this region, that is driven and fueled by innovation, not just ideas, but manufacturing and production. We must make things again in the United States. And finally, one that is rich with opportunity. Because if we do build a more productive, innovative, and sustainable economy, we will have more and better jobs. The second piece is to take that macro vision to the ground, because the next economy will be largely metropolitan. And I will show you statistics about how oversized the metropolitan contribution is to our national economy. It means we have to rethink our mental map of the United States and rethink how to power our economy forward. And the final piece, and this is really good news, and it's happening in this region and this state, is that metros are driving innovation. They really are at the vanguard of leadership in our country, partly because they're so powerful economically, partly because Washington, like Elvis, has left the building. And therefore, a lot of the responsibility in this country for even things like trade and investment are flowing downward to our cities and metropolitan areas. But let's start with what a former president called the vision thing. And let's start with exports, because I think what we want to do is visualize an economy where more firms in more sectors trade more goods and services with the world, particularly with those countries that are urbanizing rapidly. So why this focus on exports? Because we've really crossed an economic Rubicon. Together, Brazil, India, and China, the BRICS accounted for about a fifth of global GDP in 2009, surpassing the United States for the first time. By 2018, the BRICS share will grow to more than 28%. Now, the rise of Brazil and the rise of India and the rise of China is the rise of their cities. For the first time in human history, more than 50% of the world lives in cities and metropolitan areas, and that share will grow to over 60% by 2030. The locus of economic power in the world is shifting. The top 30 metropolitan areas today are almost exclusively located in Asia, where the mayor just visited, so critical to have that direct connection to Japan. The 30 worst performers are nearly all located in Europe, with a few in the United States. So we need to reorient our economy from one that has been inward focused to take advantage of this new demand. In 2010, exports made up only 13% of our GDP, compared to much larger shares in other countries, including the European Union and Japan. We have some challenges. The movement of freight is congested in this country because we have really deferred investment in roads and freight rail, in the ways in which we connect with each other. And then we all know Americans don't get out much, right? a very small number of us, share of our population, actually has passports. So we are the most diverse country in this world, but we also happen to be intensely insular, looking inward. Now, can we get back into the export game? Because it's critical to more and better jobs. Well, we still manufacture a range of advanced goods in this country. Aircraft, spacecraft, electrical machinery, precision surgical instruments, anything that is high quality, right? That's where America can excel. For all the talk of a post-industrial economy where all we were going to just do is generate ideas, we still have a robust manufacturing export base, third in the world behind Germany, which is 20% of their GDP manufacturing, and obviously behind China. It's not just about the exports of goods, it's about the exports of services, which this city and this metropolis really excels in. And the good news is we're the #1 exporter of private services in the world, and we have a $160 billion surplus in this, so we need to focus on that. Bottom line, America's potential for exports is hidden in plain sight if we return to fundamentals and we return to basics and we reimagine a different economy. Second, low carbon and lower carbon is the hallmark of the next U.S. economy. And let's imagine a world where America really is the vanguard of a clean, green industrial revolution, because everything is changing. The energy we use, the infrastructure we build. And in this region, what we're seeing is newfound gas reserves unleashed by new innovative extraction techniques have already changed the face of American energy and helped reduce emissions in the process. Now, our competitors get this. Germany gets it. China gets it. Brazil gets it. They understand that the transition to a lower carbon economy is about jobs. It's about investment. It's about capital. And it's also about the environment. But it's all those things together. Now, can we play? Now, our research shows that we already have a strong base of clean economy jobs that spreads across many different sectors in our economy. And it is large. It's nearly twice the size of the biosciences field. It's about 60% of the 4.8 million strong IT sector. It has more jobs, actually, than fossil fuel-related industries. Again, we have to rethink our mental map in the aftermath of this recession. Also, clean economy, very much export-oriented. Clean economy establishments are twice as export-intense as the national economy. So this is about our domestic market, but this is also about us providing sustainable products and services to those cities that are rapidly urbanizing. Think Shanghai, think Beijing, think Mumbai, think Sao Paulo, right? This is good business for America, good for the planet. This leads naturally, obviously, to a discussion of innovation. We must continue to be the world's innovation nation, a hothouse of invention, and again, a platform for advanced production. We need to go back and understand the inextricable link between manufacturing and innovation, something that prior generations understood but that we tended to forget. While only about 9% of all U.S. jobs are in manufacturing, about 35% of engineers. While manufacturing comprises only 11% of GDP, manufacturers account for 68% of spending on R&D that is performed by companies. And manufacturing is responsible for 90% of all patents in the United States. Bottom line, we will innovate less in the future if we don't produce more. We must make things again. And maybe we should make a clicker that will keep this going. Oh, here it goes. Okay, I think I'm going to do a left-handed thing. That's sort of different for me. This is the problem when you grow up as a righty. Last piece. Let me just keep going through this. Yes. We do have the potential to reshore because things are happening. Final piece, opportunity. I really cannot stress enough how critical this is, particularly in a metro like this, because Denver prides itself for being one of the most educated and skilled metros in this country, and it is, performing much higher than other metros on shares of workers with a bachelor's degree. But as we go forward, we need to understand that we have to get real smart real fast because the composition of our workforce is changing. We are demographically blessed in the United States because we are becoming much more racially and ethnically diverse. That connects us to the world, that actually provides us with a substitute workforce as our existing workforce ages. Here's the challenge we have. A large portion of these people do not have the education and skills to compete in this global economy. It's not just four-year degrees, it's associate degrees. It's not just high school degrees, it's high school degrees with credentials to participate in a very technologically oriented society. So reducing racial and ethnic disparities in education. So always talk about an issue of fairness. It is. It's always talked about as an issue of equity. It is. It is a competitive issue for our country. And as we go forward, and particularly as we continue to work with your political and business leadership, we need to think about how Denver and other metros crack the code. Okay, so that's a macro vision of the world. Here's the second proposition to bring it to ground. Let's understand where this economy is actually located. This is the true American economy. It is a network of 100 metropolitan areas that are 2/3 of our population, 3/4 of our GDP, and on every single indicator that matters to national prosperity, skilled workers, innovation, infrastructure, it is punching way, way, way above its weight. Now, metros pack a powerful punch. Metros generate the majority of GDP in 47 of the 50 states, including such rural states like Nebraska, Iowa, Kansas, and Arkansas. You know, we still think about ourselves as a network of rural states. That hasn't been true for a long time. Let's look at Colorado. It is clearly a metro state. Your top two metropolitan areas house 64% of the state's population and 64% of the GDP. When we look at all 7 of your metropolitan areas, 86% of the population, 85% of the state economic output. Let's just be clear, there is complete, absolute synergy and link between rural and metropolitan areas, right? But we just need to understand as a country and as a state how powerful these metros are so we make the right choices. When we talk about exports, top 100 metros dominate. 65% of all U.S. exports, 75% of service exports, which obviously is really critical to this place. Given their edge in sectors like chemicals, consulting, computers, the top 100 metros are on the front lines of commerce with China, Brazil, and India. Now, obviously, the top 100 metros drive exports for another good reason. There are logistical hubs, right? There are airports, there are seaports, there are the freight rail hubs. Now, the next economy, unlike the consumption economy, is highly variegated across the country. A Walmart is a Walmart is a Walmart, right? Guaranteed. Same design, same footprint, same prices, no matter if you're here or if you're in Detroit. And frankly, the same with many of the housing subdivisions that we're building in our country, particularly in the suburbs and the exports. But what makes Denver special, what makes you globally competitive, is different than what drives a Detroit or an Austin. You're a research center with 24 federal research institutes, including NOAA and the National Renewable Energy Lab. You're a base of advanced aerospace manufacturing, logistics hub, obviously given your airport, and a model for developing regional infrastructure to solve transportation challenges. These are all tremendous assets, but let's get a little more specific. Because I think what's critical for every metro is to have a frank and almost brutal conversation of what do you got in this next economy, in the traded sectors, in manufacturing. Here's what you have in manufacturing, 61,000 jobs. You are below the national average for manufacturing share. Look at 5% for the Denver metro. A little bit stagnant, not growing as fast because production is reshoring in this country because of shale gas and because of wages rising in China. So there's a little work to do here. Because you're not as manufacturing intense, you're not as export intense, right? Because it's the manufacturing metros, frankly, including San Jose and including Seattle and including a lot of places that we think is about service exports, but really are manufacturing hubs. So services dominate here, right? And it's dominated by travel and tourism and business services and to some extent royalties. And goods lag a little compared to the national average. The national average is more 2/3 goods, 1/3 services. But you're good in transportation, you're good in energy, you're good in computers and electronics. Here's where your exports are going. Not surprisingly, Canada and Mexico, for all intents and purposes, because of NAFTA, we need to think about Canada and Mexico as completely integrated economies, right? And that changes how we engage, not just at the national level, but how you engage with Mexico City, with Montreal, with Toronto. Obviously, this airport just gives you unbelievable connectivity, right? And it's a platform for more commerce and more exchange. And here's where some people are going. We can put aside Cancun, you know, I didn't think anyone ever left the mountains, so I'm a little surprised by that. So that leads to the final point. And this is really important for us to dwell on because, you know, it's hard basically co-producing and co-governing a city and metropolis. And I'm not just talking about elected officials. I'm talking about political leaders, government leaders in collaboration with business, civic, university, labor, environmental. That's what makes metros different from the federal government or from state governments. Your networks, that's why you're so powerful. Well, your job just got a little bit harder because in a way, it's really your responsibility now to basically use this incredible asset base that you have and leverage it up for the good of your citizenry. Now, the good news again is metros are innovating locally. Today, we will be releasing a new report, really based on insights from Mayor Daley's leadership in Chicago, called The 10 Traits of Globally Fluent Metro Areas. Now, the goal here is to get metro leaders thinking about what we call global fluency. Metros that are high in global fluency, well, they're likely to optimize the benefits of globalization, minimize its challenges, more jobs, better jobs. Now, the 10 Traits framework is designed to prompt some self-reflection in places around the country, to assess their strengths, identify their weaknesses. The result is not a ranking or an index, rather it's a continuum of global fluency from being global aware to globally oriented to globally fluent, and it's a way forward. Now, since it's called the 10 Traits paper, we've got 10 traits, right? And we just didn't sort of pluck these from the air. We looked at 42 case studies of individual metro areas throughout the world, and then we consulted with leaders in each region. And in addition to the summary of each trait you receive, the full report available is online. But let me just start with 2 of these traits so we get a sense of what we're talking about here. Let's start with leadership with a worldview and the importance of local leadership networks that understand the need to think globally. This is a real strength here in Denver. You really have changed fundamentally how you think about yourself, not just in this region, not just in this country, but really in North America and in the world. I think a lot of that really goes, you know, a lot of credit goes to Metro Denver, the Economic Development Corporation, the business leaders who have been at this for quite some time, but you're also collaborating to compete. You know, when we come to Denver, more than most metros, right, there's this worldview, but there's also this unified narrative. There's a sense that leaders across these multiple dimensions know who you are, know what makes you special. That's not true everywhere in the United States. Next piece, and I would say this might be the most important thing for the country right now, creating a culture of knowledge and innovation. You know, it's not just about the most highly educated. We put out a report a couple weeks ago about STEM, science, technology, engineering, math. We used to think about these jobs as these brainiacs coming out of Stanford or MIT or some of the research institutes here. That's what the STEM economy is. It's only 3 or 4 or 5% of the American economy. It is much, much larger. It's about 20% of the economy, and a good portion of these jobs can be filled by people coming out of high school, or people coming out of community college, or people coming out of particular skills programs where business is driving skills training so they're customized to the jobs. You have some real presence in this, but frankly, the game's never over. It's where I think a lot of work has to happen. The bottom line about the 10 traits, as you see, it's a combination of qualitative and quantitative. And I would say, and again, you're a Metro that's already doing this, do a self-assessment. Look at these 10 traits, look at each other in the eye. We're excelling on 1, 2, 3, but if this is where I think how metros continue to move forward. Now, after innovating locally, you got to advocate nationally, right? It's clear that a good amount of the power and responsibility for trade and investment lies elsewhere. Colorado, again, this new effort around your space cluster, understanding which of your sectors are oriented to trade and then leveraging them, continuing to enhance their position. Ohio, huge investments in Ohio, and this goes back really 10 years across partisan lines to invest in capital, public capital that can be put towards technology-driven industries, both manufacturing and also on the services side. Very smart investment, very high ROI. Florida, Florida has always been the gateway to Latin America, but it's invested in offices abroad. It's invested in export assistance and business development, right? Because it understands that it's sort of got to top up what the national government is investing if Florida can continue to keep a pace. And they're also doing this multimodal effort. They're combining freight, they're combining logistics, they're combining passengers. And if you go to Greater Miami today, or you go to Jacksonville, you go to Tampa, you go to Orlando, there is investment in next generation infrastructure happening. That brings us to the federal government. And I will be kind. Because we really need a national government. We can't go on, well, metros are going to pound. No, we need a national government. Metros are on their own, but they can't go it alone. And when it comes to trade and it comes to exports, there are things that national governments do. They open new markets. They set the immigration laws. They modernize and prioritize trade corridors. They provide export financing through the Ex-Im Bank, and they provide market intelligence. When Tom and others bring a delegation down to Sao Paulo or down to Mexico City or Seoul, you go to the embassy, and there are programs there to help small and medium-sized businesses connect to these local markets. So we desperately need a national government, and we desperately need to understand that the issues we're talking about today, how to thrive and prosper in a fiercely competitive global economy, requires them to do what they have to do. Cities are not going to strike their own trade deal with China or Korea. We're not going to go rogue, right? Entirely. So we need them to do the business they have to do. It's something that obviously we can all focus on. Last piece, network globally. Something is happening in the world today. We are, in essence, going back in time to a point where before nation states, or unions of nations like the European Union, what we had in this world were networks of trading cities that linked by commerce, learned great lessons, and leveraged together. We're going back to that time. Watch this animation, hopefully. The foundation of cities has always been trade. 2,000 years ago, the Silk Road linked cities from China to the Roman Empire. The world is now being remade as a network of globalizing metros that trade together based on distinctive clusters of firms, specialized expertise, and cultural affinity. San Jose, Bangalore, and Seoul are technology hubs. Portland, Copenhagen, and Curitiba focus on green industry. Detroit, Stuttgart, Monterrey, and Nagoya are linked by manufacturing. Metros that connect by trade grow and prosper together. So get a passport, find your trading partners, travel the new Silk Road. So Mayor, you're on the right track, right? Let me just end where I began, because I think it's really important to understand we have big challenges in this country post-recession. This is a pivotal decade for this country. It may actually be a shock decade. We need cities and metropolitan areas who are the engines of our economy and the centers of our trade and investment and the vehicles for environmental sustainability and social progress, and are really on the front lines of every challenge we face in this country. We need cities and metropolitan areas to be the leaders they can be. We are a metropolitan nation. We can begin to act like one, literally from this level. And if we do that, guaranteed, it will revive our fragile economy, but frankly, I think it'll fix our broken politics. Thank you very much. So you now have the pleasure of seeing the other member of the team, the other partner, my co-director, Amy Liu, who is going to take us through what I hope will be a very informative panel, both responding to some of what I've said here, but also really with Greg Clark here, beginning to focus in on this 10 traits paper that was released today. Let's see if that, perfect.